Check 1, 2, 3. Hello, Rita.
Hello, Rita. How's that?
Hello, CW. Welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll Confessional, everybody.
We're such dorks. Hey, a good one today. I really love this guy. Henry Diltz is one of the most iconic rock and roll photographers in the history of rock and roll.
Really
Let's just
is.
put it that way.
Yeah.
He has shot over 200 album covers and countless photographs that you would recognize. Morrison Hotel for the Doors is one of his most famous works of art. Everybody's seen that probably. And so famous that he's opened 3 Morrison Hotel photograph galleries that feature over 125 music photographers with great works for sale.
Henry tells us some of the stories behind his photography, including the Doors, hanging out on set with the Monkees, Jackson Browne, James Taylor, and so many more. This is a really fun interview, and really proud to do this because it's one of these people that we have grown up with, seeing his artwork forever and ever, his photographs forever and ever, and finally got a chance to talk to him. So here we go with our interview with photographer Henry Diltz.
Hey.
Hi there, Rita. Hello.
Henry Diltz, what a pleasure it is to chat and talk with you. Some of your photographs of albums that are near and dear to my heart, albums that imprinted my life. You know, whenever I see those album covers, the work that you did, I mean, it takes me right back to where I was at that time. And that, I think, is a tribute to you and the great artwork that you did.
Gosh, well, thank you, Rita. Kind of takes me back too, when I see them, because sometimes people say they walk in our gallery and say, "Well, what is your favorite photo that you ever took?" And I say, "Well, I was standing there for every one of these photos, so they were all a part of my life, and so it's really hard to pick one because it's all stuff that I was involved with, I don't think of myself as a professional photographer as much as I do just a guy interested, in music and people. And I get to go and take pictures and hang out with all these people. It's kind of a simple thing for me. It's just really something I love to do. And I mean, and some of those album covers look really beautiful, partly because I had a partner named Gary Burden, who was the art director. And not only would he help plan an adventure where we could photograph a group, we'd say, well, let's go to the desert with the Eagles, and spend the night out there on a mountain and it would get them away from their managers and their girlfriends. We didn't have cell phones back then in 72. And so we'd plan a big adventure, and Gary would say, just shoot everything that happens. Film's the cheapest part, That was a quote that I loved, And then the other quote, he would always say, move back, get the whole thing, like the Doors, Morrison Hotel. They ran behind that window, and I was up close to the window, kind of, getting it from the side and stuff, and they were looking up at me, and Gary said, back up. And I backed up all the way across the street, so we could really see that window straight on, So he always had a kind of a vision. And then he was always really good at looking at 300 photos and picking out the one that did it. So we'd have these adventures, and I would just just keep shooting all the time. That's kind of what I do anyway. And what fun. We did a few really good album covers. And I love to see them too, Sweet Baby Jane.
Oh, God.
Well, I love that song so much. And of course, I hadn't even heard the song when I shot the picture, but that was a song I sang both of my little, kids, babies, to sleep singing, good night, you moonlight lady. And I was taking publicity pictures of him, and he leaned on this big post, and his elbows were out on either side. And it made the most beautiful, it framed so beautifully as a horizontal picture. But then when the Warner Brothers art director got a hold of a slide, he kind of cropped it. And, you have to do that for an album cover. And he cropped it and kind of blew it up. And it didn't look as good as the original, that one black and white picture of him leaning on the post. One of my favorite all-time portraits that I've ever done. But I love that album. And of course, the CSN on the couch. Yeah,
God, yeah. And then going up to the mountains for the inside folder,
right.
Inside sleeve, yeah.
Yeah, Stephen Stills had bought fur coats for all three of them to celebrate finishing the album. And so we said, well, fur coats, we can't wear them on the beach. We're going to have to go up where there's snow. So we took a limo up to Big Bear. It's about a 2-3 hour drive.
Yeah.
But that was fun too. And Joni Mitchell came along. So I got to photograph Joni and Graham sitting in the back seat, kind of being lovebirds. And that was really sweet, fun. But it really is an adventure for me. I came to LA with my folk group. We came from Hawaii. We were singing in a little coffee house over there called the Green Sleeves Coffee House. And we had been singing for a couple of years, and we had really perfected this 4-part harmony. And so when we came over here to LA and sang one night, the second night we were in town, we sang at the Troubadour. And the thing is, people hadn't seen us coming up. We hadn't been singing for years. You see, like Jackson Browne, we saw him as a young kid, just singing the first couple of songs he wrote. And then we saw him develop into, this amazing singer-songwriter. But they hadn't seen us, in the days we were perfecting this. So we got up on stage and sang this one song. And when we hit this 4-part harmony, the whole audience stood up clapping. And it was really scary, like, what is going on,
Was that like 65 or 66?
It was 63.
Oh, 63. So
yeah.
So that was like before the Beatles and the Hollies,
yep.
Doing all that great harmony stuff. Wow.
Yeah, it was. And so we got a record company and an agent and a manager from that one night. And we were off and running, and then we were going across the country, touring back and forth, doing college concerts because folk music was the music,
Yeah.
And folk clubs and TV shows. And I met Stephen Stills in New York as a young kid when he would come down and hear us play at the Village Gate in Greenwich Village. And I met David Crosby somewhere on the road at a club, where he was playing with a group. And so, I knew all of these people before I ever picked up a camera. That was the beauty of it, living up in Laurel Canyon, knowing all these fellow musicians as very close friends. And then just, it became my hobby to take pictures. And I would just, I wasn't a pushy photographer. I didn't say, hey, get over there, you guys, let me take a picture. I didn't say a word. In fact, I didn't even want them to know I was taking their picture. It's kind of a stealthy thing. If you find out you're a Chinese animal, that's sometimes kind of interesting. It's like your astrological sign, only different, and I'm a tiger. And it turns out that tigers like to hide and watch the other animals, sit up on top of a cliff and look down at the animals or hide in the bushes. That's my kind of style of photography, kind of fly on the wall, they call it, documentary style. I like to observe people and then take pictures when it really looks interesting to me. And it seems to work as a formula.
I think that the fact that you were a musician first, that kind of opened a door for you because they were comfortable around you. I think your primary instruments are banjo and harmonica. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
So you hung around these people and you were just like part of the crowd. Is there any part of you that misses the fact that you weren't on that same level music-wise? Like a Jackson Browne or a Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Oh, we had a lot of fun being a folk group in the days when folk music was so, so adored, so sought after. So we had a good time, and we were together in the early 60s, broke up for 10 years, got back together in the late 70s because it was the 200th anniversary, the bicentennial of
1976.
And it turns out that a lot of, clubs, hotels, we got a call from the Hilton, some hotel in Hawaii, a Hilton hotel. They wanted to book us for 2 weeks, to come back and sing for the dinner crowd. And we got back together for that. And then we played for another 3-4 years, broke up, And then in the late 80s, someone said, you guys have a lot of fans in Japan. You could do a tour over there. And we did. And then we went back there 6 times in the 90s and 2000. And we have 6 albums we recorded in Japan. So we're, still doing it. Not right at the moment, but we've kept at it all along. But, you said, hanging out with, I got to hang out with these people. I always say musicians, half of their life is hanging out. I mean, you're hanging out backstage, waiting for the concert, or you're rehearsing, or you're, in a recording studio, kind of waiting around, or in an airport, or an airplane, or a van, or what. But you hang out a lot, and then you play for a couple hours in the evening. And so hanging out is a kind of an art. And I do think some people who are, fancy themselves professional photographers, okay, I'm here now, I'm going to start taking the pictures. And, and a lot of musicians don't like that. You gotta learn to hang out a little bit and, be kind of, let it happen. Let the universe, decide kind of, you can't be pushy. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
I guess accidentally, I was that way, that kind of a hangout guy. I didn't mind hanging out for a couple of hours, until I took the picture. That's what I did anyway.
One story that you talk about is the shooting of Morrison Hotel, The Doors, that album cover, and how there was somebody working there who said, no, you can't take that picture, but he went upstairs out of the way, and you were able to get that picture. How long did you have to, like Gary was saying, go back, go forward? One
roll of film, yeah. We'd seen, Raymond Zarek had told us about this hotel, and we went, Jim and Ray and my partner Gary and I, the 4 of us went down and looked at it one day, and wow, there it was. It looked great. We brought the band back the next week and just walked in the lobby. It was a flop house. It was a place for vagrants, I think you could get a cot for 50 cents, to sleep it off. And so we walked in, and there was just some young guy behind the desk. The lobby was totally empty. And the lobby had old kind of secondhand furniture, with the stuffing coming out. And we said, I said, we'll just be over there taking a few pictures. And he said, no, you can't. You have to get the owner's permission. He was so kind of adamant about it. Turns out it was a famous slumlord who owned that hotel and was very particular about anything that happened there. And so I said, come on, you guys, we have to go stand outside. I figured we could stand in front of the window because we're on the sidewalk. They can't stop us, And so we did. We walked outside, and I noticed through the window a light had gone on in the back of the room, a big white light. And I looked through the window, and oh wow, that's the elevator light. Look, the guy left the desk. Quick, run in there, you guys. And they did, they ran in and just hit those marks. Nobody had to say, wait a minute, you guys, move a little to the left, It just was perfect. And I just started clicking away, took a few frames. Gary said, back up. And then we got, just them sitting in the window. At one point, some guy walked by delivering a pizza for lunch. A delivery guy walked by, was carrying food. So I got that. I always like it when there's a guest appearance in an album cover, And then we got right out of there, and nobody saw us. We got out on the sidewalk. Jim said, let's go get a drink. And it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we got in their Volkswagen van, their band van, and drove a few blocks to Skid Row. And, there were so many bars, we didn't know where to stop until someone saw, wow, look over there, the Hard Rock Cafe. No one had ever heard that before. And we got to go there and get some beer. And we did. And Jim liked listening to the old winos in there tell their stories, about their lives. And you could just see, he didn't talk a lot. He mostly listened. And you could almost see the wheels going around in his head, poems. As these guys talked about their life, the adventures of their life and the Merchant Marines or at 16, or whatever. And then when that album came out, my partner Gary put a picture of the Hard Rock Cafe on the back of the Morrison Hotel album. And as soon as the album came out, someone called them from London. The voice on the phone said, would you mind if we use that name? We're starting a cafe. we're starting a cafe here in London. And we like to call it the Hard Rock Cafe. And they said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then that was the beginning of that whole Hard Rock Cafe empire.
Wow.
That's just amazing.
It's funny, years later, 20 years ago, friends of mine and I got together and opened up a little gallery. And we were in New York City in Soho. And it was only my pictures on the wall. And we didn't have a name for the gallery. It said in small letters, the photography of Henry Diltz. But we had no big title, no sign. And so at one point, we had a big, huge blow up of that album cover photo. I mean, the photo itself is bigger than the album cover. It goes out on each side. There's lamps on either side of the window that you don't see because they crop them off for the album cover. So it's a really interesting picture. And it was right in the window. And we would stand across the street, my partner and I, and watch people walk by. And they do a double take and stop and walk back and look at it and then walk in the gallery. And I said, look how that draws people, and look at that beautiful lettering, that half moon saying Morrison Hotel, in red with drop shadows. And I said, and look at our window up above, nothing. It's just a blank window. And my partner, Peter, said, you know what? That's a great idea. I'll have a sign painter come tomorrow and put Morrison Hotel on our window as a kind of while the photo was in the window. And then, of course, that stuck as the name. But, we didn't say, let's name ourselves after that album or that hotel. It kind of happened organically. Yeah. So it's funny that one album on the backside was the Hard Rock Cafe empire. And on the front side was our baby empire, our beginning of we have 3 Morrison Hotel galleries now, and we represent 125 of the really best music photographers.
That's amazing.
You have locations in New York, in Los Angeles, and I guess in Maui.
Maui, at Big Fleetwood Club in Maui.
And there's going to be a big celebration coming up at the end of this month, right? For the 50th anniversary of Lake Morrison, or celebrating 1971, the artwork of 1971.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, we pick different themes once a month and have a great big party, right now it's 71. Of course, that album was 70, I believe. I mean, I took the picture in 69. If you look on the cover, you see little colored lights to the left behind them. And that's a Christmas tree. They had a kind of a little shabby Christmas tree with lights on it in the lobby. So it was December of 69 when I took the picture. And then, of course, it comes out months later.
Yeah.
Henry, at the beginning, were you hired by the record companies, or did the Doors or Crosby, Stills, Nash, did they say, we know Henry, he's our friend, he'll take photos?
Yeah.
Then do you still own those photos, or does Warner Brothers or Elektra, whoever the record company is, own them?
Yeah, it could have been either way, but I was very lucky. Because as we said, I was photographing my friends. I mean, a lot of pictures I took, I was just taking them and they'd say, wow, could we use this? And I'd have an accidental album cover or something like that. That happened. And then knowing all these guys, and then they were managed by Elliot Roberts and David Geffen. I mean, many of the acts were Lookout Mountain Management. And we were kind of in there as, a part of the whole thing. I mean, we'd go down there. I would go in there every day. I'd do errands around Hollywood, drive down the hill from Laurel Canyon in my Volkswagen, stop by the office, to say hi to Graham Nash or Glenn Fry or whoever happened to be there. We could listen to David Geffen yelling on the phone down the hallway, flirt with the secretaries, maybe have a little hit of somebody's joint, And so we were a part of the club, part of the team. And so they would just call us, David Geffen or Elliot would call, say, hey, I remember one day they called Gary and said, you and Henry go over to this young songwriter, and take a picture for his first album cover. His name's Jackson Brown. He lives over by the Hollywood Bowl, And I mean, we went over there and knocked on the door and he, he said, come on in. And he sat and played part of his first album. Oh, it was amazing. And then we took pictures in the backyard, and Gary made this great album cover out of it. It's funny, he and Jackson were talking on the phone, and Jackson said he was on the phone talking to Gary about what the cover should look like. And he glanced up and he saw a canvas water bag that his father, Jackson's father, had used when he would drive across the desert in those old cars. You'd have to fill this canvas bag with water and hang it on the front of your car to keep the radiator cool. And he said, Gary, it could be anything, really. It could be a water bag. And then Gary said, that's a great idea, and we can. And in later years, we've interviewed Jackson and talking about album covers. And he said, yeah, I always thought of it as a kind of like an Indian has a shield. He has a shield and he has this kind of his life's thing on the shield, the emblem of his life or whatever. And that's kind of what an album cover is. And I thought that was great. And then, I remember I said, Gary, if it's going to be a water bag, we should put water inside of it. So I photographed my Sparklets cooler. I put a new bottle of Sparklets up on this thing and it went blug, 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 blug. And I kept photographing that. And when you pull the inner sleeve out, it's a picture of water.
I always wondered what that was.
That
is
great.
Fantastic.
I love Henry, how you had that moment to be able to be friends or to connect with who you were shooting. It's like, so much in the later years, it's like, the artist shows up, there's a studio, it's set up, ready to go, snap, 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 go away. You were at that place, that early place where you were there, you could connect with them, you could get a little bit into their head and then kind of work together, and you weren't just told what to do, but you could just take the ball and kind of run with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was always kind of a friendly adventure for me. I mean, it was never like, oh, there's a photographer and they don't even know what his name is. Stand in front of the paper and the lights go off, flash, flash. I didn't go to photo school. I don't know how to light, I use God's light, just available light. And it was much more organic for me. And you ask about, did I have to give all the pictures away to record companies? No, because luckily, we were a team, Gary Burden and I, doing these albums for the management, for the group itself. And then they would present the album cover to the record company. So, I mean, if I took 300 pictures for an album cover, I mean, I had 299 of them left, unused. And no, I have all those in a huge, file on my wall, a whole wall full of slide boxes. So luckily, I did get to hold on to a lot of that stuff.
All right. Hope that you're enjoying this interview with Henry Diltz. Time for a quick break to do a little biz.
I want to always thank everybody for listening. We love doing this podcast. It's our way to reach out to all of the rock and roll fans that we have out there. And as you know, we have no sponsors. Just dedicated fans like you. If you can spare as little as $1 a month, please go to patreon.com or go to our support tab on our website, which is rockandrollconfessional.rocks. Help us out, please. We do need your help. We're grateful for all of you that have already taken the initiative to do so. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Reitz, it's a good time for trivia.
It's a great time for trivia. How about this one here, CW? As a teenager, young Jackson Browne was going to Sunny Hills High School in Fullerton. He played in popular clubs, and he actually played with a popular band. What is the name of that band before we all knew Jackson Browne?
Got any choices?
Oh, yes, sure. That would help, huh?
Well,
no, I was
going to go with Social Distortion because they're from Fullerton, but I might be off a little.
Metallica, Queens of the Stone Age, something like that.
Okay, but what are those choices?
Would it be the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band? Would it be Grand Funk Railroad, Poco, or New Riders of the Purple Sage? What say you? The answer at the end of the second half. So here we go with the second half of our interview with Henry Diltz. I've heard your file is from America to Zappa.
Yeah, there is America and there is Zappa. And then, it's alphabetical, through there. Yeah.
Loved watching you on the Laurel Canyon documentary. That was just fantastic. Just what a wonderful life you've lived, and just to be such a part of it and still be so eloquent about the time, to talk about it with such reverence. I love that. There were a lot of other people that you were photographing at the time that became big pop stars, but they really wanted to be known more for their music. And I'm thinking of the Monkees and Keith Partridge.
David Cassisdy.
David Cassisdy, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I somehow got into the pop magazines, teeny bopper magazines, Tiger Beat and stuff. And I, I would occasionally do the Jackson 5 or Donny Osmond or somebody, and it would be in the magazine. And then they started calling me to go down and spend the day photographing the Monkees. And then a few years later, could you spend the day photographing the Partridge Family? And so I went down to the studio in Burbank, the big lot there, and I walked in the first day and I met David, and I was a few years older than him, but roughly his age, and I kind of had long hair and love beads, and I wasn't like the other, especially the Monkees. They would say, before you came, Henry, there were these kind of old guys that were AP photographers, and they'd say, "Okay, boys, do something zany," and they just hated that, And of course, and so I wasn't a director. I would never tell anyone what to do, I would wait until they looked great and then just take their picture. And so that's what I did with the Monkees. And God, we had 2 years I shot on that. Went on their not world tour, but their US tour in 68, 67, 68, somewhere.
Is that the one where Hendrix opened?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
for a few shows.
Yeah.
For a few shows. And I got there a couple of shows into it. And I arrived at the afternoon concert just as he was leaving the stage for the last concert. But we all did party back at the hotel, and I got to hang out with Jimmy there, so that was fun. But then David and the Partridge Family, so I met him the first day on the set, and we became friends. I mean, in fact, we just were talking a little bit, and I said, yeah, I just came back from England. I was living at Stephen Still's house for the past 4 months. Really? He said, really? Wow. He said, look, when we take the next break from filming, let's go to my trailer. I've got a guitar there. I'll play a song. And I mean, he saw me as somebody connected to, as you said, to the rock and roll world. He wanted to be up on stage singing, not to be Keith Partridge, really, which was his daily job. And then soon after that, he started doing solo tours. And finally, in 74, I think, 73, 74, couple of times I went around the world with him, like all over the world, Japan, Australia, Scandinavia, Europe, and just being his photographer.
That had to have been crazy because that was the height of his popularity, right? And so people were screaming in the streets and
girls everywhere.
Yeah,
there were. Yeah, I mean, the first place I went was Auckland, New Zealand. And arrived at the hotel, and early the next morning, there was the girls, we love you, David. We always do. La, la, la. And I'm going, oh, no, shut up. It's 8:00 in the morning. Musicians sleep till noon,
Not anymore.
Yeah, but we had great fun seeing the world,
And were you on set with the Partridge Family and the Monkees?
Yes.
You were there, like, as long as they were out there taping or whatever, filming at that time, you were there photographing them.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I'm doing, it was like production stills, just shooting everything that happens. Only for Tiger Beat wanted nice portraits of the four boys, individual portraits of them smiling so they could put them on the cover of Tiger Beat.
Right. Or the poster.
So being a still man and not even the official production still man, but sent by a magazine, you have to have a very low profile. And so I would talk about a tiger in the bushes. I would sit in the middle of all of the lighting stands because I knew if I was there, they wouldn't see me, because, if you're in the wrong place and the camera sees you, they're going to say, get that guy out of here, So I would sit amongst the light stands and train my telephoto lens through them. And then I'd be watching Davy Jones across the room. And then someone would tell a joke and he would turn and laugh and I'd go click, So just waiting, just watching, kind of trained on a face. And when you saw a great expression, or something really great, click, you just get it. You just keep doing that. And by the end of the day, you have 500 of those, Well, it it would have been 500 now digitally. That was film, 36 to a roll, and then you've got to rewind it and put a new roll in. So, but 10 rolls was a good day. That's 360 pictures.
Jeez.
And for those, I would have to give those to the magazines, and if I hadn't had this little team with Gary Burden, I would have had to give, most photographers, the record company hires them, they pay you the money, they want all the pictures, and you never see them again. That is the usual way that it works.
I thought I read something where you had shot very little, I think it was of Jimi Hendrix, but a lot of those slides or negatives, well, they haven't turned up missing, but they've been missing or something?
Yeah, for some reason, of all the people I've photographed, I mean, the Jimi Hendrix photos disappear. I mean, I had a few rolls in a photo lab, and then suddenly they weren't there anymore. And it turned out there was some young guy who worked there for the summer and then went away somewhere and nobody knew where he was. And then finally we heard he died somewhere. And I don't know where those negatives are, Wow. I went right after Woodstock, I went right to Life magazine because Michael Lang hired me to be the official photographer. So I had to get all my film developed and bring it to Life magazine because they were going to do a special issue. And I watched the guy open the yellow boxes from Kodak and look at them with a loop and make piles of my photos that they wanted to keep to use. And I never saw those again.
Wow.
I mean, they used some of them in a magazine. And then a few years later, I would call and ask, they'd say, well, gosh, we looked through all our files and we don't see anything, without a name on it. I didn't have a name stamp, The only Woodstock pictures we have the names of our photographers stamped on them, and mine just disappeared. But that, hey, it happens. I remember before scanning. Now it's different. Now you can scan everything.
Right.
And you send a scan. You don't send the original. I remember, back a bunch of years ago, I had 2 or 3 pictures of Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, and he wanted to use a couple in something, and I sent him the original slides. And I don't even know who that was now. Never got him back. So now I have 1 picture of Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, but it's the best one. It's a great film.
At Woodstock, didn't he perform at 3, 4, 5 in the morning or something like that? Because the schedule was off.
It was like 7 in the morning. I mean, it was before the sun came at 6, maybe. I don't know. It was still, before sunup, dawn. He came out at dawn and played. And gosh, it was so amazing. And I was standing on stage, sort of 20 feet away behind an amp from the side, watching him. And they played a few songs, and then he suddenly started playing the Star Spangled Banner. And boy, it was so surprising because, I mean, I think everyone, at least I was aware that, this was a crowd of 400,000 or 500,000 peace and love hippies, But the Vietnam War was going on, and not a person there would have wanted to go. I mean, everybody was afraid they'd be drafted and have to go overseas and kill people they didn't know. That didn't jibe with the 60s, brother, peace and love thing, Water Brothers, and wow. And so for him to play that song for an instant, it was like, wait a minute, that's the establishment song. That's the official, that's not, that's the enemy's song, so to speak, And then in the next second you think, no, wait a minute, he's claiming that back for us, And the funny thing is, we don't really know. I have a couple of clues. Number one, he lived for part of that summer, early summer, in a house with a conga player. I forget his name, but he was in the band. And then in later years, kind of recently, he said, yeah, Jimmy was rehearsing that song for weeks and weeks, So it wasn't something that he just did spur of the moment. He really had a plan. And then when I think back to it, the amazing thing was when in the middle of the song, he started making, boom, war noises, and he started playing that on his guitar. And later I've thought, well, when Francis Scott Key wrote that song, he was up on a hill watching Fort McHenry being bombarded by the British fleet. And there were bombs bursting in air. And he was hearing all of that noise of war while he was writing that song. So, wow, that kind of brought it all back home. And of course, Jimmy had been a paratrooper or something.
Right.
He'd been in the service. So, I mean, I wish we could ask him right now, what were you thinking, Jimmy? What kind of state? Were you reclaiming that song, or were you trying to show that war is hell? Or what were you trying to remind us exactly? I guess all of that,
Yeah. And thank God you were there and be able to tell us,
An
that story.
amazing moment. There are some, I was telling someone the other day, another amazing moment was Nicolette Larson was a young girl, singer-songwriter, and she, I don't like to use the D word, she walked into the next room. She went to the other side, she died.
Yeah.
And so there was a big memorial at the Santa Monica Civic, and all kinds of bands were playing and everything. And Linda Ronstadt got up and sang this Jimmy Webb song. First of all, Jimmy Webb songs always make me cry.
Yeah.
I just get tears in my eyes. They just hit you somewhere. But she sang a song of his called Adios. And it was a song he wrote saying goodbye to LA when he moved out of LA. Adios. I'll miss the bright red sunsets, and what a beautiful song. I'm going to cry talking about it. But when she sang that, I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. In fact, the band, I know Lee Sklar looked over at Waddy Wachtel and both of their glasses were steamed up and they had tears, rolling down their face. It was the most amazing moment. I mean, her voice has got such power and just, it was such a touching moment, saying goodbye, which we all were.
Speaking of Jimmy Webb, like you said, some of the best lyrics that have ever been written, by the time I get to Phoenix and Galveston and MacArthur Park. You have an interesting story with Jimmy Webb.
Well, yes. Jimmy Webb and I were crashing buddies. We crashed in an airplane together. He loved flying. He loved, gliders, soaring, as he called it. And he wrote songs about it. And in fact, he wrote a whole album, that soaring had inspired him. And so he called Gary and I, the team, and we went out and we spent the afternoon out in Pear Blossom, way up in the valley. And I took pictures of him. I was in the front of the plane and he was behind me, and I turned around to take pictures. And that was his album cover. It's called Land's End. And then we looked at those pictures. Oh, and I had a Super 8 camera. So I, buzzed off a few feet of stuff. And when we looked at the slides, we also looked at that. And then Jimmy said, wait a minute. And he ran in the next room and got the album and put it on. It hadn't come out yet, of course, but he had the tape of it. And it was the London Philharmonic playing the song Land's End. And we looked at my little Super 8 footage of gliders gliding around. And it was so beautiful. It fit so beautifully because it was written for that, And we said, well, let's go back out there and do a movie. We'll do 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter. And we did. We went out there with 3 35 millimeter cameras at dawn. And so Jimmy and I had a huge camera in front of me in the front of the plane. It filled right up to the top of the plastic, cockpit. And we got towed up, from the desert floor up the side of the mountain. And we told the tow plane, take us back further in the mountain so we can get a good run at calming down, and then I'll be filming that from the cockpit. And so they let us way off into the mountains. And it turns out there was a big windstorm that day on the desert, which caused a sucking downdraft in the mountains. So when they let us go, we were surrounded by mountains. And instead of flying over them onto the desert, we started sinking lower and lower and lower until we couldn't get out of this ring of mountains. And Jimmy said, I think we're going down. Well, there were no flat places. It was all the sides of mountains with pine trees and snow on the ground. And so his gliding instructor had taught him, if you ever have to fly into trees, make sure you pick 2 trees and take both wings off at the same time. Otherwise, it'll spin you around.
Right.
It'll be more dangerous. So he did it. He headed right for the pine trees, flew right and took both wings off at the same time. We ended up unconscious with the tail of the plane up against a tree. So we were looking down, and wow, it was, but we lived through it. It was silent. Suddenly it was just silent. And I kind of opened my eyes, and Jimmy behind me said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "That's what it feels like to die."
Wow.
You need to do that anymore.
Where's the film?
The film ended up in the trees like Christmas decorations.
Like it opened up and you lost everything?
When we crashed, it broke the camera apart, and the film all just, was all in the trees like confetti, like decorations. Too bad.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So there are adventures along the way, but that's what the fun is. Life is an adventure,
Sure is. Sure is.
How did it feel when a very acclaimed photographer asked you to photograph her and her husband? And that was Linda McCartney.
Aha, Linda. Yeah. Well, when I was in New York in '66, photographing the Lovin' Spoonful, I met her in a photo lab, modern age photo lab. I was getting my film developed, and she was there doing the same thing. We just struck up a conversation. And so we got to be friends, and we'd talk on the phone once in a while. She came to LA and we had lunch. And then one day I was amazed to discover she'd married Paul McCartney. Suddenly, wow, my friend Linda married one of the Beatles. And a year or two later, she called me on the phone. They were in Malibu at a big house, and they needed pictures of both of them. So, of course, she became his photographer. She took all the pictures then. But they needed a picture of both of them because they had done the Ram album, and she was on the album. So I spent the day out there at this big house they'd rented on the beach with the swimming pool. We sat around the pool. Paul sat on a deck chair plunking his ukulele, and we had lunch there. The little girls were swimming. At one point, the little girls held hands and jumped into the pool together, and Paul was plunking his ukulele, and without missing a beat, he just said, "Two little sisters jumping in the pool." A little melody. I don't remember the melody. I remember the words, though. And I thought, wow, now there's a Paul McCartney song that I'm the only one that heard it, him and me. It went up into the ether. It wasn't on the next album. So, but that was amazing. And then we took that portrait of the two of them. She said, "We need a nice portrait." And then she said, at the end of the day, she said, "No, I want to see these pictures first thing in the morning because Life magazine needs one for a cover." I went, what? I mean, Life magazine was the holy grail.
Yeah.
The cover of Life magazine. Wow. And so that happened. That was great. I mean, it's fun to hang out with Paul McCartney. He's, we're talking about folk music before, and in '63, I was saying we got here, and then they played, and 64, they played Ed Sullivan, and all the folk groups pulled into motels if they were on the road to see the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, because we'd heard, well, what is this fuss about this group? I've never really kind of heard them, but well, there they were on TV, shaking their heads and singing "She Loves You," yeah, yeah, yeah. And we're thinking, what are we singing these old cowboy and miner and sailor songs, folk music? And those guys are having fun. Look at them, and we went out the next week and got an electric bass because we had a stand-up bass. It's so many groups. That's why you had the Byrds and the Buffalo Springfield.
Yeah.
Those people were folk singers. Stephen Stills was a folk. I saw him sing in a coffee house, It's so funny. I saw him sing in a coffee house in New York in Greenwich Village in '63. And his big song was "The Bear Went Over the Mountain." The bear went over the mountain, the bear, with maybe some changes in it. I thought, wow, that's really clever. Because as a folk group, you look for old songs to sing, But here's the guy starting out with that old, and now, helplessly hoping her harlequin hovers nearby. Wow. He's such a great songwriter, and the words, that song I've heard. What is the name of it?
Helplessly hoping.
Yeah, of course. The first words.
You mean the Bear song?
Yeah, the Bear song. Yeah, helplessly hoping. Recently, last year there was. You could see it on YouTube. An Italian a cappella group singing that song.
Mm.
And it starts out with one picture. It's like a Zoom thing, but it's one girl singing, and she's Italian, and she goes, helplessly opening her harlequin others nearby. And then another voice comes in, and then the two of them, and then there's 3, and then there's 10, and then there's 20. And it just is so killer beautiful. And I and that's the first time those words really sunk into my head. I've heard it so many times. I never really thought about what the words meant, but it's a beautiful piece. That's for sure. So great. Such great songs, and it was the Beatles playing Ed Sullivan, and they kind of learned from the Everly Brothers and from our blues players and kind of gave it back to us. And because they wrote their own songs, people started writing their own songs. And that was a big sea change in the music industry, there were the songwriters and the singers. I always say Frank Sinatra never wrote any songs,
True.
Elvis Presley didn't write any songs. There were the songwriters and the singers. But that changed in the middle 60s, partly because of the Beatles, partly because of Dylan, partly just it was an evolutionary thing. And then people like Joni Mitchell and James Taylor and Stephen Stills started writing their own feelings about life and then singing those feelings themselves, which added so much more to it, than just, singing some other guy's song. Was up in the 12th floor at a piano, trying to think of Moon, June,
Spittoon.
I mean, a guy like Jackson Brown, wow, his songs are all like anthems,
Mm-hmm.
and just
I always think of you in Fountain of Sorrow, because it was like I was looking through some photographs and I was taken by a photograph of you.
Yeah.
One of the lines in the song, and it's like, God, I'm sure that you would helped inspire that line. I'm sure.
Yes, indeed. At one point out some years ago, I thought, I should do an album of photo songs, as a folk singer, Mama Don't Take My Kodachrome Away. And of course, that Jackson Brown song. And I don't know if there are 12 really good ones. I
I'm
never
sure
did
there
it.
are.
Anyway, but Jackson is one of my favorite, writers, singer, songwriters.
Well, him and Joni Mitchell, at the same time, the stuff that they released is just like, holy crap. People
and the evolution that brought all that together. And, there are no, they're not doing that now. The music of today, it's very interesting and it's very diverse. There's 40 different, categories of music now. Hey, back in the 60s, 70s, you drive down Sunset Boulevard and there'd be 5 different stations playing the Beach Boys and the Byrds, and the Buffalo Springfield. Yeah. Just all the new pop music was on all the channels pretty much. So that group of singer-songwriters who did it, once I asked Jackson, we were talking about the 60s, I said, when people say to you, Jackson, wow, you're lucky you lived there then, why do you say the 60s was so great, and he says, because it was brand new. Because it was a brand new thing.
It was like a renaissance of sorts.
Yeah. That was a renaissance and a flowering, I think, of creativity. I don't know, it's fun to think about how that happened. And it hasn't happened again, really, has it, for a while? We've been coasting along.
Yeah.
There have been some great songs and some great singers, but we haven't had a group of singer-songwriters like that kind of changed our lives.
True.
Yeah.
Henry, we have a couple of our sponsors that wanted to ask you some questions. We have 2 of them real quick. John Scott wanted to know, who was the most difficult artist to work with?
I always say David Crosby. No, my pal David Crosby, a sweet guy, but he likes to be a bad boy. He likes to just say no, Henry, or give you the finger, and then he'll laugh. He's a Leo. He can't help it. But no, I love David. That's great. I've never really had much of a problem because I've never been really pushy about it. I don't want to be the guy where they say, who's that guy? What is, get him out of here. He's getting in the way. I never want to, I want to hide, and just observe without getting in the way or changing anything. I want to see it like it really happens.
Yeah.
Once some guy from a record company called me and wanted me to go photograph the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They were doing a concert here in LA. And they gave me a backstage pass. I met the guy from and I'd never met the group, but he said, well, here, put this backstage pass and just go in the dressing room and take some photos. Well, I mean, I know as a musician, that's not really going to fly,
Right.
So, I mean, I kind of sidled in there. There were some people in there. I kind of got in unnoticed. And then I just put my cameras down and just sat on the edge of the sofa, for 5 or 10 minutes watching, smiling at people. And then then they knew I was established in there and that I could quietly get my camera and not even move, but just take a few pictures. And those are the real pictures anyway, That's what's really going on. So you can't be pushy.
Jeannie Smith wants to know, do you have a favorite album cover that you shot? If so, can you tell us the story behind it? Let's skip the Morrison Hotel because we've already talked.
I would say that Crosby, Stills, Nash sitting on the couch for their first album. I mean, that is probably my favorite album cover, partly because I knew those guys so well. It's an amazing album. It's such great music. And
I would have to say maybe also the Eagles, Desperado, that you shot the back cover for that.
Yeah.
You shot the first album too.
Okay, I would say
on Peyote.
Yeah, the back of the Desperado. I wasn't so happy with the front of it. It looked a little dark to me. The four of them standing there holding guns. I think the back though I loved because after playing cowboys all day in this little ghost town sort of movie Western ranch place, J.D. Souther had a book of outlaw heroes, actual photographs from the 1800s. And they were all mostly posed, and it would be the posse posing with their rifles and the dead outlaws there. Sometimes they'd even prop a guy up and hold him up and he'd be dead and they'd take a picture with him, And so we saw this picture of the dead outlaws laying in the street and all the posse posed. So we posed that with roadies and their manager. And even my partner, Gary Burden, is in there. He's the guy with the long hair and the rifle over on the left side. He really looks the part, and I like that picture a lot. But the CSN on the couch picture, I like. And, the other thing is album covers were all glossy. It was glossy material. Well, Gary told the printer for that CSN album, he said, I want you to turn the paper over and print on the uncoated side. And they said, well, we can't do that. It's going to soak up the ink. And the record company said, he said, do what? But we had the band behind us. The band said, you do whatever Gary wants. And so they printed it that way. And so when you get one of those original covers, it's got a texture to it. It's the rough side of the paper. It's not glossy. So it's kind of organic. It's kind of like we call that stuff wooden music anyway, kind of like it's wooden music. And you can feel that cover. It's got a real great organic texture to it. After everyone settled down, then they all wanted them done that way. After the record company had a fit and the printer had a fit, it turned out to be just great. And that's because Gary Burden was really an architect before, and he was rebuilding part of Mama Cass's house. And they got to be friends. And she said, and he's a great guy. Everybody loved Gary. And she said, Gary, I want you to do my first album cover. And he said, well, Cass, I'm an architect. I'm not a graphic artist. And she said, well, you make a blueprint, you make an album cover. What's the difference? But being an architect, he was used to working with different materials, and try to try something new. And he printed on foil, and he printed, many different ways Gary innovated for album covers. So the CSN on the couch was kind of the granddaddy one for me. I just love that. And once again, I was right up close photographing them sitting on the couch. It filled the frame horizontally, rectangular, perfect framing. And in fact, you sort of see that on the cover. That's the picture, the way it looks. But then Gary said, back up, get the whole house, I'm going, wait, I'm framing this. No, back up. I backed up across the street and got the whole house. Because if you remember, that album cover folds around to the back and there's a guy peeking out the back door, which everyone thinks is Neil Young, but it was really, really their drummer.
It was a Dallas Taylor.
Dallas Taylor, right. And he wasn't in the back door. He got stripped in there later. We took a picture of him, leaning in Crosby's kitchen back door, and Gary stuck it in there, So once again, back up. I love it. And I mean, it really taught me now, I really do go, I kind of get in there. I want to get the face. I want to get close up, and really feel what's happening. But you also want to see the whole picture. What's going on? What was around that? So, I mean, I've kind of, he taught me. He was my teacher. And now I take wide angle as well.
Oh, that's fascinating stuff. You've just been such a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for your brilliance, not only in your photography, but in the way that you speak, in the way that you revere those times, because it was all a special time. It's still a special time for you doing what you're doing now and preserving all that. And talk a little bit about the Morrison Gallery. Let people know where it's at, because I know that, I think Christmas time, what a great Christmas gift for somebody. Yeah. I mean, come on, those beautiful works
of art. Your husband or your girlfriend, or people come in. Oh, James Taylor's my husband's favorite. It's his birthday, and we're at the Sunset Marquis Hotel in L.A.,
which has its own history.
That's right off Sunset Boulevard, and you can look it up, MorrisonHotelGallery.com, and we have many, many photos by many photographers there. Yeah.
Henry, so we have a couple last minute questions we're going to throw at you. It's called the bonus round.
Okay.
Who was the first rock star you met?
Oh, boy. Yikes. Rock star. See, well, I'll have to, and forgetting all the folk days, meeting Pete Seeger and people like that.
Pete Seeger. Wow.
That's pretty cool right there.
Yeah, my God. Wow.
I mean, it would be at the Troubadour when we were down there. Maybe it was Hoyt Axton.
Yep.
Hoyt Axton, who was playing the Troubadour, Linda Ronstadt, I met pretty early on because she always hung out at the Troubadour. Everyone hung out at the Troubadour, so much that we were all a kind of a big family.
But so many of the people that you photographed just being around became big rock stars,
They did, I say, I lived in Laurel Canyon. I photographed all my friends there, and one by one, they became famous. So that was my break. That was my good fortune, as well as theirs, of course. But
who would the ultimate musician be to shoot that you never shot?
Oh, John Lennon. Never photographed John Lennon. But, I also love jazz. And I love the standards. Funny, we talked about songwriters and writing their own stuff, but the old standard, the old jazz, standard book of songs, Laura and Moonlight Serenade and all that stuff. But Paul Desmond, who played the alto sax with Dave Brubeck, I love hearing that guy play. And there's a song he plays called Emily. And whenever I meet anyone named Emily, I say, "Oh, Emily, that's my favorite song. Do you know that song?" No, half of them say no. I say, "Are you kidding?" You go look on, Apple or Spotify or whatever it is, iTunes. You'll see 40, 50 versions, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett. And then listen to Paul Desmond play it on his alto. So I'd say John Lennon first and Paul Desmond second. Yeah.
Cool.
I want to just quickly mention something that I thought was, high praise for you. And that was when you were sent to go take pictures of Garth Brooks, and you showed him some of the stuff that you had taken, some of the album covers. And he said, "This is the reason why I got into music. James Taylor and the Eagles and Jackson Brown. This is why I got into music."
Yeah.
Dan Fogelberg. Yeah. I mean, what high praise is that from Garth Brooks? I mean, wow.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. In the 80s, I did work for a record company, freelance, Capitol Records, kind of the publicity department, which meant I could go to all the concerts and things and get a photo pass. And they said, "Well, we want you to photograph this country guy who's doing a showcase we've just signed him." And that was Garth Brooks. And I just happened to have this little book pasted black and white photos. We finally did make a book out of it, but it was just a demo. And he looked, he said, "Henry, you took these pictures?" He said, "These are my heroes." He said, "This is why I sing. This is why I write music and sing music. These guys." And then I kept getting calls, "Garth wonders if you'll come out on the road next weekend." And, and then I went to Ireland with him for a couple of weeks. And we got to be good friends. Yeah, he's a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Puts on a great show too.
Oh boy, what a show he put on. Yeah. What That's a show. Cool.
Well, best of luck with everything. Thank you so much for taking an hour of your time and talking with us. And we can't wait to get up to the gallery and see some stuff and some pictures and stuff. And, you always talk about, your life. You got to hang with all these people. Just hanging with you for an hour. We're blessed with doing that. So
absolutely,
thank you so much.
Henry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
much.
It's fun to reminisce and think about that stuff, Yeah, but onward. To the next thing, right?
Indeed.
The adventure continues.
Indeed.
Absolutely. So,
okay, everybody.
Thank you, Henry.
Blessings.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye. What a charming man. Man, I could have talked to him for hours,
I wish we were there at a big dinner and just hanging out with him because, he could tell stories. We could tell stories. It would be a blast. Like, I want to have a big party and have Henry like at the head of the table and just, you know what? Let's just talk stuff.
That's a great idea. And
I'll get on it.
Thanks. And if not, you can maybe just go by his gallery. We'll give you all that information. But thank you so much, Henry Diltz, for being a part of our podcast. Also, special thanks to Paige Califano, who works with Henry at the gallery, for taking the time to coordinate the interview. You can follow Henry via Instagram at Henry Diltz. That is DILTZ, and on Facebook at Henry Diltz Photo.
Also follow the Morrison Hotel Gallery via Instagram at Morrison Hotel Gallery, Facebook Morrison Hotel Gallery, and you can also check out Henry's work along with the other many rock and roll photographers at morrisonhotelgallery.com.
Many of the pictures that were talked about by Henry in the interview are posted. Just go to our website to check out our show notes.
That's where you can find the photos along with some of the other fun information and videos, including a quick video of Henry's archives in his house.
Ooh. And check out the posts on Instagram and Facebook, both at Rock and Roll Confessional. Please share and like them. It helps get the word out. And if you're thinking of that special item for, that hard to buy for somebody, what a
like
great
CW would like one for.
Which one do you want?
Oh, I don't even know where to be. It's one of those things where I feel like there's so many. I would just.
Yeah.
It would take me a while to pick because there's so many great photographs to choose from.
I mean, look at all those album covers. Like you said, Doors, Morrison Hotel, James Taylor, Sweet Baby James, Crosby, Stills and Nash, the debut album. It's got so many, so many.
Yeah. That'd be a great gift for the holiday season to give one of your good friends. Anyway, Reeds, trivia answer time.
As a teenager, Jackson Browne played in a popular band. What is the name of the band? Was it Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Grand Funk Railroad, Hoco, or New Riders of the Purple Sage?
I already know. So you can just spit it out there.
Well, let's just say a very early incarnation of a Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
I like that.
Yeah, it's very cool. And then, Jackson's got such a rich history. You go back when writing a song like These Days when he's 16 years old. I mean, come on. And then going on the club circuit, 16 years old.
Back when you could at 16.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. More shows coming up. Keep in touch. See you in a few weeks. Talk to you in a few weeks. Say goodbye, Reeds.
Goodbye, Reeds.
Goodbye, everybody.